Thank you. February 24th, 2022 has become the worst day of my life. The worst day of the life of all Ukrainians, you can imagine. It was a morning when I woke up here in Brussels, far away from my family, who's watching me, by the way, far away from my home. I was 8 months pregnant, and I didn't know that on that morning, I'll have to pull all the strengths I have inside of me and push it all together in order not to fall apart on the day when the world broke for me. Luckily for me, I've done a lot of volunteering experience, and I have encountered people and I've collected stories from all the different places of lives that served me as an inspiration and that were my strength for that day. I started my volunteering in high school. It was 2014, and I've got an opportunity to volunteer at the local soldiers' hospital in my home city, Dnipro. We're just 200 kilometers away from Donetsk, so in 2014, it was important to volunteer and to be there with your community because we became a front line of humanitarian aid for the military conflict in the eastern Ukraine. In that hospital, I met a young man with the saddest eyes that I've ever seen in my entire life. He told me that he always wanted to be a policeman. He thought it was a very noble profession and he couldn't wait to start service once he finished his academy. So when he did, he was actually put on the Revolution of Dignity in Kiev to beat up the peaceful protesters because our government was pro-Russian. And just a few weeks after that, when the government has changed, as those things happen very rapidly, he was then put to the front lines in Donbass to fight pro-Ukrainian forces, of course, and pro-Ukrainian government. That's where he got a shelling in his leg and was transported to the hospital where we met. I remember he looked at me and he said, "I really don't understand why you come here, volunteers, and do anything for someone like me. People say here I am a hero, but I'm really, really opposite of that. I didn't have a choice in what I did, but I don't know how to go on anymore." That summer, I've also volunteered at the summer camp for single mothers in the village Valoskaya, which is very near to my home city, Dnipro. And that's where I met Luba. And Luba is the mother of four boys. Can you imagine? They're all below the age of 4 because when we met, the eldest ones were about 3, maybe 3.5. And they were twins, by the way, I didn't mention. And then the other 2 boys, they were also twins. No, they were around 3-4 months old. They were really newborns. I was helping her with the kids, and one day we had to go to the hospital to get them checked because they weren't feeling so good. And I remember we were at the doctor's office, and he announced to her that one of her eldest ones has autism, and being quite a stigmatized condition in Ukraine still, I was so surprised and shocked because I didn't know what thoughts she had racing in her mind at that moment. She's a single mother of 4 boys. She has no family, no partner in sight, and now also no home behind her. But all she did, she just sat there very calmly. She looked up at her son, smiled with a very gentle smile, the only smile that the mother can give a child that she loves with all of her heart. She looked at him, smiled, and said, "Well, that's not the worst thing that could have happened. We're going to put you firmly on your feet even this way." I've also volunteered at the orphanage for the kids with cerebral palsy in my home city, Dnipro. And let me tell you that this is really a magical place because the kids there, they have so much light and so much kindness within them that everything around lights up. It's also a very sad place, let me tell you, because being an outsider, you come in and you realize that many of those kids won't have a happy ending outside of the walls of the orphanage. On one of the occasions, we created this kind of Christmas, New Year Eve celebration for them and brought some presents for the kids. And I was marching down the hallway to entertain and talk to one of these girls. She was about 6, 7 years old. She had a condition that affected her spine. So since birth, she was not able to walk. And as I was marching through the corridor, I heard her voice in one of the rooms, very, very bright and very high, saying, "Hello, princess. Come on in, let's draw." I paused and froze in the doorway because, with all my respect, in this scenario, I was not the princess. Maybe 10 or 12 years older than her, I felt very awkward and weird. Unfortunately, the girl passed away a few years after our encounter, but that positivity and that bright voice of "Hello, princess" really lives with me and still rings in my ears when I think of her. Finally, after I've graduated from my master's degree in international relations, one of the first places where I had my traineeship was Charitable Fund Right to Protection. And it's a great organization in Ukraine which provides legal assistance or legal help to stateless persons, internally displaced persons, or refugees. As it was in the middle of a pandemic, and I was in London back then, everything was online, everything was virtual. And it doesn't sound so exotic anymore, right? We're all used to that now. So one of the tasks I had to do was to call the people who asked for help and interview them, and then record their story so that it could be used for the website, for promotion, or just stored in the archive. And I called this man, Gennady, and he told me his story that he was born in a village, Khorlivka, which is actually a village where my father is from as well. And he was born with a disability, so his parents kind of left him there, so he doesn't have a family, and he never had it. He also served a term in the prison in Lugansk, so he was quite an overlooked category of a person in Ukraine as well. And when he came out of the prison and he arranged his family with a wife and 2 kids, that's when the military conflict started. He had nowhere to go, he had no help, he didn't know what to do. So luckily, his friend left him a home, his house, and he said that he could stay there with the kids because he left. He just went to the government-controlled areas. And that's when the so-called Donetsk People Republic militia started coming in, paying a visit, beating them up, stealing some furniture, some instruments, and trying to convince Gennady to join the militia in order to fight against the Ukrainians. He didn't want to do that, so the brutal beatings continued and continued again and again. And on one of those occasions, they took his passport and they ripped the passport in front of his face in order to dehumanize him, to tell him that he's nothing and he doesn't even exist in the system anymore. So shortly after that, his wife and kids left the government-controlled area. He then reunited with them, and having asked help from the Charitable Fund Right to Protection, his citizenship, Ukrainian citizenship, was later reinstated based on the archived documents of his document of birth. And what struck me in that story was that despite all the horror that you hear, he said, "I was so grateful to my friend, because if he wouldn't have left the house, even in the non-government controlled area, I would probably die out of hunger or I would go back to prison again." So all these stories, they came vividly back to my mind on February 24th, 2022. A young man in the hospital taught me that even when your core beliefs and values fall apart, my life still continues. Mother Luba taught me that the motherly love is the only beacon of light and strength that we have. And me, being a young mom, it's a value for me that I want to transport to my child as well. The young girl from the orphanage, the Hello Princess one, taught me that there is just so many things in life we cannot control, but what I can control is my attitudes towards myself and towards the others. And finally, Gennady taught me that even at the darkest moments of your life, at the worst days of your life, there are always good people that can and are willing to help. So taking all this voluntary experience I have, it's not a big surprise that I ended up working in a nonprofit, as was announced earlier by Roerd. And I'm very proud to be working at Junior Achievement Europe because this year we were actually nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's a great recognition, obviously, of our efforts to empower youth, to do our experiential programs of entrepreneurship, to build the future of work. But more importantly, it's a great recognition of the fact that education, skills development, and workforce development are fundamental for peace in the world. I am truly amazed when my colleagues from Junior Achievement Ukraine chapter send me videos and photos of young people in Ukraine going through our program still, even if it means that 1 second they're sitting in the classroom and another second they're going into the bomb shelter, and they continue to innovate, to think outside of the box, to network, to talk, to imagine the world that they will create once everything is over. And it's not the first time. It's not the first time that the future of Ukraine is being written from the bomb shelter. In my family, my great-great-grandparents fought the First World War. My great-grandparents fought the Second World War. My grandparents were born either during or right after the Second World War. My parents had to go through the collapse of Soviet Union, which meant they had to start everything from zero. And currently, my brother, me, and all the young people of Ukraine have already undergone through 2 revolutions and are currently witnessing the war. So I really want you to pause here and think about it once again. There is not a single generation of Ukrainians in Ukraine today that wouldn't have had experience or memory of war. And yet, we choose and we continue to be unbreakable. And my takeaway for you from this talk is not something like we should donate more to the Ukraine Armed Forces, even though I personally think it's one of the best things to help. I'm not going to say we should hire more Ukrainians, even though I personally think they are the best, the most agile, the most creative talent that you'll find out there. And I'm privileged to be a part of it. What I want to tell you, and what I want you to take from this talk, is that I wish each and every one of you today is going to become a little Ukrainian after you hear me. And what I mean by this is, God forbid any one of you goes even nearly close to what we are going through in Ukraine or outside of Ukraine, as me. What I mean by this is that you choose every day to be unbreakable, that you choose to live, and that just like the young man in the hospital, once your core values and core beliefs will fall apart one day, you will continue to live and go on. Just like the mother, Luba, you recognize and embrace the motherly love you have in your life. And you, as you become older and you develop your own families, transport that motherly love to your kids, and you let them know that it's always going to be there, no matter what. Just like the young girl in the orphanage, you remember that many things are out of your control, and that's okay. But the only thing you can control is your attitudes towards yourself and towards the others. And as Gennady, you remember that at the darkest days of your lives, there are also good people around you that are willing and who can help. And hopefully, just like me, you will be able to speak up and remind those values to others when they are in need. Thank you very much for your attention.